Lightning Aura, Chaos Crystal, Shock Aura, I'll take 50. Putting me at 950. And then I will New Year's New Beginnings.
New Year's New Beginnings. One of the most, if not the most, iconic card in all of MetaZoo. But why is that? In the short history of MetaZoo, New Year's New Beginnings has risen to the top of deck lists due to its sheer power and wide playability. Costing only one neutral aura, it can be played in every single deck, and allows its caster to force both players to place their chapters or hands, for those who may not be well versed in terminology, into their cemeteries, and bookmark or draw a new chapter of 7 cards. Some of you may ask, well, why is that so good? It seems balanced, and each player gets the same amount of cards. Though it may be counterintuitive, there are many examples of why supposedly balanced and symmetrical effects are unfair. Let's examine some examples in Magic the Gathering, as most of my current audience is probably very aware and involved in that game. Unlike its name, the card Balance, in fact, does not have a balanced effect, and is a fantastic example of symmetrical effects being unfair in Magic the Gathering. It has been banned in 2 out of the 3 formats it was legal in, being restricted to 1 copy in the other, the same format that Black Lotus is also restricted in. First, let's examine and discuss the effects. Balance reads, each player chooses the number of lands they control equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Players discard cards and sacrifice creatures the same way. Many new players will see a card with similar effects and say, but we both have to sacrifice lands and creatures. It seems fair. This could not be further from the truth. Even with the effects being the same, the player who cast Balance will likely have built their deck around the card, and the player who can best exploit the effect will always come out on top. In Ben Blayweiss's article, The Top 50 White Cards, he placed Balance in first place, calling it the most broken spell in Magic. He then went on to showcase many powerful and successful decks running 4 copies of the card before its restriction, and when running a deck with few creatures or ramp, Balance can essentially remove your opponent's board for 2 mana, while making them lose card advantage. Then, the Balance player would simply finish off their opponent with cards such as the Rack and Zurin Orb. When there's a deck that can be formed to exploit certain effects, not only can the negative aspects greatly hurt your opponent, but you can use the positive effects to greater advantage with your own cards. For just 2 mana, this card would be a nightmare to play against. Unlike other cards that are good at controlling opponents' game plan, this card does not specifically target aggro, control, or ramp, but is effectively able to take out all 3 at once. Before we return to discussing New Year's New Beginnings, let's look at one more Magic card whose effect is much closer to that of New Year's New Beginnings. Wheel of Fortune is a sorcery that costs 2 generic mana and 1 red mana to cast. Wheel, as it is commonly referred to, is often regarded as the best red card ever printed, and just like Balance, has seen itself banned or restricted in every single format it was legal in. The effect of Wheel is the same as the effect of New Year's New Beginnings, where each player must discard their hand and draw 7 cards. Once again, the decks that run this card will be able to exploit this effect and gain more value. Wheel of Fortune is also infamous for turn 1 wins, where the player who goes first will play lots of mana generators and ramp, then cast Wheel of Fortune. The reason this is so beneficial is that the player who went first was able to play cards and develop their board already, and then completely refresh their hand, as well as their opponent's, who hasn't even gotten to draw. As Anthony Alongi put it blows up hands that players carefully craft, and often mulligan for, while replenishing the hands of those who have already spent out their resources. This can be a real feels-bad moment for the other player, which can detract from the fun of the game. Of course, because chances are the player with Wheel of Fortune wouldn't have enough ramp to play it on turn 1, but even then, in Magic, turn 3 to 4 isn't really enough to develop your board much. Now, let's return to New Year's New Beginnings. I want to show why this is even more problematic than Wheel of Fortune. Just like Magic has the Moxes and the Black Lotus, MetaZoo has the Crystals and the Chaos Crystal as its counterparts. Additionally, since the player who goes first gets to bookmark on their first turn, and gets the first chance to destroy opponents' artifacts and beasties, the first player advantage is already very high. But when the first player also gets to dump out 2 or 3 artifacts, and then reset everyone's hands, potentially giving their opponent a terrible hand before they're even able to play anything, it grants that player a gargantuan advantage. Wheel of Fortune costs red mana, restricting the decks it can be played in, but New Year's New Beginnings costs neutral aura and only costs 1 as opposed to Wheel's 3. Additionally, Wheel still sees play while it was restricted, making it 1 copy and 60 cards, but for MetaZoo, New Year's New Beginnings is 1 out of 40 cards. This makes New Year's New Beginnings a much more consistent and objectively more powerful card. Let's take a theoretical first turn. You are going first on Mono Lightning, and your opening hand is 2 Aura, a Chaos Crystal, a Lightning Glass, a Shock Aura, and a Ding Bell, plus New Year's New Beginnings, of course. So, on turn 1, you could play a Lightning Aura, fatigue it, take 50 to play Shock Aura, play the Lightning Glass and the Chaos Crystal, and then New Year's New Beginnings. So, when you pass your turn, you will have 4 pages on the arena, 7 aura available for your next turn, and 7 cards in your hand, while your opponent still only has 7 cards, and there is a chance that it will be an unplayable hand versus the one that they kept. Sure, this is a fantastic hand and seems unlikely, but in my playtesting I've had many similar hands with Mana Rocks and New Year's New Beginnings, and there were even many examples of really powerful New Year's New Beginnings in the only MetaZoo tournament that has happened so far. Also, let's say we're late in the game and you're playing a forest deck. You were able to ramp out early and get tempo, so you'd be able to dump out your hand and have board advantage and control of the game. If at any point you draw New Year's New Beginnings, you can just refill your hand so you'll have more resources, already be ahead on board, and now have even more cards to use. I asked a few players in the MetaZoo Discord, and the overall consensus is that it's a huge feels bad playing against it, and will often lead to you losing the game on the spot. What we have concluded at this point is that New Year's New Beginnings can be really unbalanced when played, and it has a large amount of variability. But overall, it should average out to be fair, right? Even if it's uneven in each game, each player has an equal chance of drawing it, right? Wrong. This gets much, much worse, which is where the conundrum arises. Scarcity has always been a large issue with trading card games, especially when the most powerful cards which everyone wants to play are the hardest to obtain. For example, the Black Lotus, which is the most powerful and sought-after card in all of Magic. In the first set, Alpha, there was a print run of just over 1,000 Black Lotuses, which was nowhere near enough for the player base, so throughout the year they reprinted the main set in Beta, Unlimited, and Revised. And while there were now over 20,000 Black Lotuses, it was still not enough for the player base. It can have negative playability effects and a giant paywall if the best card in the game is the hardest to acquire. The next card we will look at is Mechanical Chaser, from Yu-Gi-Oh! With 1850 attack, it had the highest attack points for any monster you could normal summon at the time it was printed. This means it would literally be unbeatable in combat because it could destroy any monster it faced. The issue was how it could be obtained. Mechanical Chaser was only found in the Season 1 tournament packs, which had 30 cards in the pool, but only 3 in each pack, and Mechanical Chaser was in the highest rarity set of those cards, making it difficult to get 1, and near impossible to get 3 of these. Mechanical Chaser was the only ultra rare in this set, and would be found in approximately 1 out of 108 packs opened. These boosters could only be obtained by playing at an LGS during a certain time period. Since everyone would want 3, and there would be a clear advantage to having them in your deck for no drawback, much like New Year's New Beginnings, it drove the price to around $200 to $300. A story was given in Rubendale's History of Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta video, where one player was able to get their hands on 3 Mechanical Chasers, and they would win every match by a landslide and just win all the prizes at the tournaments they went to, because they were able to pay for the money wall that gave a clear advantage. Now, returning to MetaZoo. New Year's New Beginnings, hence its name, was printed as a New Year's promo, and has no plans of being reprinted until next year. The print run of New Year's New Beginnings is very close to that of Alpha Black Lotus, sitting at exactly 1,000. The only way to get one currently is to buy one on eBay or other marketplaces. First, you need to find one for sale. I've looked almost every day on eBay, and they're not often for sale, and even when they are extremely expensive. As of the filming of this video, 0 are available for purchase on eBay, and those that have already sold generally range between $150 to $300, besides a few early sellers that sold for less than $100. So far, using similar examples from other games and MetaZoo, I've shown the sheer power of this card, how it can make games less fun, and how it is really hard to obtain. Finally, I will propose some solutions. Hi, editing Peazful here. Sorry to interrupt. Before I continue, I just want to make it very clear that while I've been harsh or critical of some parts of the game in this video, I love MetaZoo and his community, and I have the utmost respect to Michael Waddell and his team for creating such a fantastic game and bringing it to the super high level. And, like, there's sure to be bumps along the way, problems with rules, so the purpose of this video is simply to address an issue I saw and propose a solution, some constructive criticism to further help and improve a game I love. And there's nothing better for a game than for the community to actively engage in its formation and change. That being said, if you have any critiques or disagreements with any points I made in this video, please comment them down below. I would love nothing more than to have a nice discussion about this topic. Now, to continue with my proposed solutions. Solution 1. Ban New Year's New Beginnings to stop the advantage that those who are able to get the card have. Once the card is reprinted at the end of the year, unban the card. Solution 2. Run an emergency reprint of the card as soon as possible to get every player of the game a copy of it. And Solution 3. Even with everyone having access to the card, it highly increases the first player advantage past where it already is, and having powerful zero-costing cards like the Crystal makes it even stronger. Not only will a portion of games just be over on turn 1 due to the advantage and tempo gained, but an equal portion of the games will be hurt due to the other player drawing a bad hand and not having the option to mulligan. That is why my third solution, which is the one I support the most, even though I think all three of these solutions would be fantastic, is to permanently ban the card New Year's New Beginnings. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is probably one of the longest scripted videos I've ever made, and I put a lot of effort into it, especially the editing. I would greatly appreciate if you would consider subscribing or liking this video, and please tell me any feedback or comments you have in the comments below.